It can be a real time of intense confusion in the relationship because you can't figure out when the love bombing ended and when the contempt began. All you know is it's though the weather changed. It went from being very warm to very cold kind of quickly. Let's go to this question of narcissists and pedestals. What am I even talking about? When I say pedestal, I'm really referring to the idea of putting someone on a pedestal. So let's take this in two different directions. Number one, when a narcissist puts you on a pedestal, and number two, when you put the narcissist on a pedestal. So let's start talking about how they put you on a pedestal. First of all, no one should be on a pedestal. And the reason is, anytime you go on a pedestal, guess what's most likely to happen? You're gonna fall. Nobody ever stays on a pedestal. We really should kind of all be standing on the same hard, even ground. But many people who have been in narcissistic relationships, not all, and some of you are thinking, God, my mom never put me on a pedestal, or my husband never, or my wife, or anyone never put me on a pedestal. This doesn't always happen. But I have no doubt that for a significant number of you, you were put on a pedestal by whatever narcissist you had. Why do they do that? First of all, it's often part of the love bombing part of a relationship. They really pump you up. I cannot believe how lucky I am to be with you. You're the most beautiful thing in the world. I mean, wow, this is amazing. And on and on and on and on. They put you on a pedestal. And for those of us out there, most of you, anyone who's sane actually finds that uncomfortable initially. There's something a little bit seductive. You're like, whoa, I sort of feel special. But then we always think, oh, I'm not going to be able to stay on this pedestal for long. They're going to start seeing through to the whole me. And then at some point, they're going to realize, I don't live up on this pedestal. I'm not all that. Nobody is all that. But it is kind of fun for a little while to be put up there. I always tell people, if you're put on a pedestal, be very, very careful. Because what's likely to be coming soon is the devaluing and the discarding phases. So why would a narcissist even put you on a pedestal in the first place, especially since over time, they're more likely to view you with contempt and devalue you and discard you and invalidate you? Why the heck would they put you up on such a high shelf in the first place? Well, the answer lies in grandiosity. For the narcissistic person, it's all about the grandiosity. And the grandiosity, as we've talked about many times on this channel before, is a defense that protects them. Okay, if I say I'm great, then I must be great. If I drive a great car, I must be great. If I carry a great bag, I must be great. If I do great things that I can share with the world on social media, then I must be great. Versus this idea of really creating themselves as a person of depth or anything like that, the grandiosity becomes protective of their core insecurity. Well, you're part of the new ride now, aren't you? So they have to put you on a pedestal to help drive the grandiosity. You have to be great so they can be great. So it's really not a recognition of your true wonderfulness. But if that's the case, all of us should be on pedestals. And then who the hell is going to be walking around on the ground? They're doing this to make them look good to the world. I'm sure a few of you will think of events or incidences in your life where maybe you were more attractive than your narcissist, or had something going on that they didn't. You had a more powerful job, you had a more, maybe a more advanced educational background, you may have had more power, your family might be sort of, more recognized in the community, whatever it may be, but you may have really brought something to the table. In a lot of cases, it's just simply attractiveness. When that happens, the narcissist really has a lot of buy-in because your good stuff, your grandiose stuff as it was, even though you may not think of it as grandiose, helps prop them up. And they're very, very proud. So they put you on a pedestal. Again, it's for them. It's not about you. And it helps foster and strengthen their own sense of grandiosity. But here's what happens. That gets exhausting for them after a while. They can't keep it up. I actually don't think anyone can keep it up. On that case, narcissist, not a narcissist, it's hard to keep someone up on a pedestal. The fact is, at some point, and forgive me for saying something so crude, someone farts in front of you. And then you realize like, oh, everyone's human. And there is always that sort of fall from grace. I actually think it's the best moment of all that happens in a relationship. When your partner or friend or anyone sees you as a human being, not someone on a pedestal. And this idea of pedestaling people can even happen in family systems, especially if you're bringing in some good stuff into the family. Let's say you're a kid who's a sports star or a fancy ballerina, or you're doing really well in school or getting some other awards and honors, that the narcissist in your family may also put you on the pedestal, sort of in a more of a golden child role. And that can also be sort of off-putting for the other people in the family, and also uncomfortable for you, who might feel like, I don't know if I want to be in this position. And in fact, the only reason they're putting me on a pedestal is so I make them look good, and not that because they necessarily are linked in deeply to my emotional world or anything like that. So that's why narcissists do it. But I can guarantee you it's just a matter of time before they will devalue you, they will discard you, and you're going to be left wondering, how did that happen? Many of you might not even think like, I want to be back on the pedestal, but you're going to wonder, how did I fall off so quickly and so abruptly? In fact, some people will even say like, how do I even go back to that time? It's not even that I want to be on a pedestal, but I would love for this narcissistic person in my life to still see these good things in me. But the only reason they saw them is because it was propping up the narcissist's grandiosity. As you sit up on that pedestal, the thing that's happening day over day over day is that your narcissist is getting more insecure. They may even think that, God, I hope they don't find out that maybe I shouldn't be with them. Like all of their insecurity gets started up. Maybe the narcissist may think maybe my partner's too attractive and is going to leave and is going to cheat, or maybe my partner makes more money than me and they're going to see through that. They're not aware of that discourse. They just feel uncomfortable. They may fess up to it, for example, to a therapist or something, but they're going to be uncomfortable. And as a result of that, as that discomfort grows and grows and grows, and they keep you up on your strange little pedestal, then one day you hit the tipping point and they will start to devalue you and they will start to discard you. That is inevitable. So in some ways, once you're put up on a pedestal, that should be a big, tall, red flag. In fact, if you are put up on a pedestal, the one thing you're going to try to do is find a ladder and climb back down real quickly. It's not a comfortable place to stay in any human relationship. So let's flip it. What about when you put the narcissist on a pedestal? And many of us have done it, right? They're charming, they're charismatic, they're confident, they're successful. It's very appealing to take this new, attractive, engaging person in your life and put them up on a pedestal. I'm so lucky, this person's giving me so much attention, they're so into me, they have achieved so much in their life. And you start playing the game, especially if they're love bombing you. They're love bombing you. In some ways, you're kind of giving it back. You're giving them that narcissistic supply. You may even be full-on narcissistic fluffing, just like, woo, this is so great. And then you put them up on a pedestal. That's a very, very dangerous place for a narcissist to be, because from that pedestal, they are often going to try to control you and manipulate you and have you exactly where they want. And since they're already up on a pedestal, it's almost like now that they have the bird's eye view, they have a good sense of what they can do and how much control they can hold in a relationship. Many times people put people on pedestals, like we put our narcissists on pedestals, because we don't feel like we're good enough. Because we feel like we're not good enough, oh, I'm so lucky you want to spend time with me, so boop, we put them up on the pedestal. It's really, really important. And whether you're putting a narcissist or a non-narcissist in your life on a pedestal, that's never a healthy dynamic. All of us deserve the experience of feeling equal and comfortable in our relationships. That we can look that we are all people, and that there's not that people have it all over us and belong on a pedestal. Sadly, we do live in a culture where we do have a lot of celebrity worship, and we believe certain people are better on the basis of their achievements. I know what I'm saying right now is going to be a tough sell, but no one really is. I don't care if they're a world famous athlete, or if they're a head of a major company, or they're a famous movie star. All of you can be standing on the same even ground. I'm going to be honest with you. Once you put that narcissist in your life on a pedestal, there's no getting them down. If the day comes that you do want this relationship to be more equal, so in other words, let's say you've been in the relationship 6, 12 months. You've put them up on that pedestal. You'll be like, enough already. I need this person to take the trash out. They're not going to come down off that pedestal and take the trash out. That's just not what they do. So it's a very risky precedent, and it often can originate from that part of ourselves that say, I'm not enough. So maybe I need to put them up there so they don't leave me. If that's what you need to do to keep the relationship going, you're better off walking away from it with grace and finding a relationship where you stand on more equal ground with someone, as well as doing the psychological work yourself so you feel like you are enough, no matter who you're with. Pedestals and human relationships don't go together well. And another place we see this is in the workplace and in family relationships. In family relationships, you may very well put the narcissist on a pedestal, and here's another problem. Sometimes narcissists get up on pedestals and you're not the one who put them up there. Other people did. This particularly can happen if you're from a family system where there's a communal narcissist, or if you're even in a relationship with a communal narcissist. Everyone's saying, oh, they're so great, they're a pillar of the community, they're so involved in the church, they've donated so much money, they've helped me out when I've gone through a hard time. Everyone else puts them up on a pedestal. And yet, that person on a pedestal is treating you horribly. It can be really, really hard when someone is put on a pedestal by the rest of the world to be able to communicate in a way so that other people understand what it is you're going through. And I can promise you this, you ain't going to be the one to pull them down off that pedestal. The best you're going to be able to do is walk away from that relationship or set some really, really hardcore boundaries, because the fact of the matter is, as long as they're up there, their grandiosity is keeping them up. It's almost like the world creates a monster when they put people up on a pedestal. And this can happen in the workplace too. Think of jobs you've had where you work for someone who is all that, right? This is the company to work for. This is the boss to work for. And everyone puts that person all the way up there. Those are often bosses who are at greater vulnerability of mistreating employees, of playing favorites, of, again, rolling that grandiosity card in the workplace and creating a workplace that's triangulated, chaotic, tense, entitled, and the odds of you advancing, I mean, there's usually only enough room on a pedestal for one person. So that might create also a structure where you're not going to be the one to climb up. And perhaps it's the people who really keep that person up on the pedestal who does. And leaders who are kept up on pedestals are often not able to understand or attend to the needs of the people who work for them, because their head's so up in the clouds, they may just be getting dizzy from the altitude. Pedestals, relationships, I don't care if it's your close relationships, friends, workplace, or family, they don't go together. If you're up on one, try to figure out a way to get down. If you're up on one, try to figure out a way to get down from there real quick. Doesn't mean you have to put yourself down, but humanize yourself in that relationship. And it's easy to get blinded once you're up on that pedestal, think, wow, this is all that. Instead, pay attention. That's not where you belong, and I trust me, that fall from grace high up from that pedestal is not going to feel good. And before you put the narcissistic person in your life up on a pedestal, or get yourself into situations where they're put up there by other people, recognize that if you think a narcissist at ground level is a handful, you should try it out when they're up on a pedestal. So let's take on this issue of devaluing and discarding. The classical narcissistic fairy tale starts with idealization and then moves on to devaluation and then discarding. Everyone thinks it won't happen to them, and yet, without exception, the story goes down the same way every time. To feel thrown away by another person is an awful experience, but yet it is sort of a universal part of the narcissistic relationship. So let's start by taking a look at the narcissistic relationship cycle. In most cases, not all by any means, but most, the idealization often takes the form of love bombing. which is another video in this series. So love bombing or idealization lasts just long enough to get you stuck in this relationship dynamic. Just when you exhale and believe in the fairy tale, then bam, that's when the devaluation phase starts. Devaluation can start slow. It's when the little criticisms begin, when you start experiencing the contempt, when the gifts and the big nights out go away, when the narcissist's phone becomes much more interesting than you sitting in front of them, and when the sideways comments like, I don't know, like, are you really gonna wear that? And other comments of that ilk start to creep into the relationship. It can be a real time of intense confusion in the relationship because you can't figure out when the love bombing ended and when the contempt began. All you know is it's though the weather changed. It went from being very warm to very cold kind of quickly. The devaluing phase tends to happen just as you start to feel more settled into the relationship as a real relationship. You may have actually been resisting the relationship for a while, and you might have even have been savvy enough to think, oh, this love bombing is a little bit too good to be true. I'm not going to be played. And then just when you settled in, when you felt like it was a real and whole relationship, that is when the devaluation begins. The reason for this sort of shift, it's a bit nuanced, but it largely happens because at the deepest deep, a narcissist's self-loathing is actually so deep and so unprocessed that just as someone does see the good in them, it's as though it activates their self-contempt, which they then project onto you, and then voila, devaluation. It's as though they project their devaluation of themselves onto you. Now, devaluation can last for months, years, and even decades. It becomes, before you know it, sort of a new normal. Your life tends to be punctuated by insults and by invalidation. The discard is just what it sounds like. Discarding is honestly like throwing out the trash. It's like they're done with you. Now, sometimes discarding never really truly happens. You may just kind of get stuck in the purgatory of devaluation forever. But discarding happens when they cast you aside. And this is almost like discarding is like, it can be really cold, and you can actually have a narcissistic relationship that keeps happening even when you've been discarded. So for example, your narcissist may have an affair, an extramarital affair, or just cheat on you. And so you were, in essence, discarded, but you still stay in the relationship. Or they may take a job or take advantage of an opportunity that doesn't take you into consideration. So either you have to leave your life behind to join them or be left behind. So they're just kind of doing what works for them. The discarding is often motivated for the narcissist from a place of both contempt and of boredom. Basically, your narcissistic supply has become quite stale. And narcissists tend to be very novelty seeking. So it all depends on your story. No matter what, it feels awful to be discarded from a relationship that you actually believe that you're in. Many narcissists expect you often to do the dirty work and end the relationship so they can turn around and say, oh, she was the one who left me. He was the one who filed for divorce. She moved out and walked out on me and the kids. Oh, he walked away from his family. When that happens, they get to look good to the world. And since the narcissist is often going to turn around and tell the world a false story, then you look like the one who was unfeeling or unkind or willing to walk away from something, which doesn't feel good. Now, the mistakes that people most often make during the devaluation and the discarding phase is to ask that killer question, why? During the devaluation phase, they're going to gaslight you and deny that they are devaluing you. And in fact, they may turn around and call you paranoid or hypersensitive or crazy. Now, during the discarding phase, if you try to make them accountable for their behavior, again, you're going to run into more gaslighting. Now, people want to make sense of this process. So asking why is understandable, but there's really no sense to be made of it because the narcissist isn't going to cop to it. The narcissist isn't going to turn around and say, yeah, I'm not capable of making healthy attachments and I'm deeply insecure and I have contempt for intimacy. So I am actually, I'm rejecting you and I'm treating you badly to see and test my hypothesis that you will observe my insecurity and that you will leave me. And my fantasy is that's the case. And then let's see if that comes true. Now, they are not going to say that to you, even though that's the dynamic that's likely unfolding. So asking them for an explanation is likely to bring more harm than good because they themselves aren't in touch with what's happening. Now, the devaluing and discarding cycles happen in families as well. In general, if you aren't just blindly going along with a narcissist agenda, then they often think that you are against them. And in a family, this can happen when you just don't go along with the program, with what the narcissistic parent or sibling or aunt or grandparent want. Your family members, the family members will find out that they learn that if you appease the narcissistic family member, then you will be able to keep them calm and stay in their good graces. And this can be particularly profound if the narcissist has some kind of power. So, for example, the money that they may use to control family members. So if you do lay down some real boundaries, that's when often in a family, the devaluation and discarding cycle can begin. Now, for scapegoats in a family system, the discard and devaluation cycle is an eternal part of the scapegoat's role in the family system. They're constantly being devalued, and if the scapegoat tries to set a boundary, boom, they'll be discarded. Now, devaluing and discarding can also absolutely take place in workplace settings. And in those cases, it's in which narcissistic bosses and narcissistic managers and leaders devalue the people that they think aren't their team players. Basically, these are the people who are not the yes men or the yes women. And then ultimately, they may make life so miserable for the people who don't just sign on with whatever twisted agenda they have, that those people actually end up leaving or may get fired. Now, the devaluation and discarding cycle is, sadly enough, often followed by hoovering. That's why it's a dysfunctional cycle. Some people get so disgusted by the discarding cycle that they do ultimately leave. But it's not unusual for that insecure narcissist who wants to keep control to try to hoover them back. Now, if you fall for it and allow yourself to be sucked in, that whole cycle is going to begin again. Idealization, devaluation, and discarding. It's just sort of this eternal cycle that's really only going to end if you're the one who's going to be courageous enough to break it. And it can really be quite addictive. Lots of people confuse the excitement of hoovering and idealization with love. It's really not. It's abuse. And therapy becomes a key tool to at least start thinking about how to end the confusion and the conflation that love and abusive relationship cycles are the same thing. Now, narcissists devalue and discard for many of the reasons mentioned, but also because they devalue intimacy and because they have very limited empathy. They don't really care how these cycles are hurting you or impacting you. They just do it without thinking. And in some ways, the chaos, it feels comfortable for them. They don't have any regard for how it hurts you, but they do kind of like the excitement and the roller coaster nature of this cycle. Now, these toxic cycles take a tremendous toll on the people who get stuck in them. basically this turns relationships into roller coasters and almost like addictive cycles. And these can often perpetuate early childhood patterns you may have had around rejection. In some ways, these toxic cycles keep their relationship exciting for the narcissist. And it's very easy to get sucked into their vortex and cycle. And for some people, this cycle, strangely enough, becomes sort of a reenactment of trying to win over their unwinnable parent in childhood. It almost feels familiar to be rejected, and it can feel exciting when you are hoovered back in and idealized for a minute. And in that moment, you're almost taken back to childhood where you feel like, oh, I've won that parent over. But then when the devaluing and discard cycles happen, and it's inevitable that they will, sadly, those cycles feel familiar too. And your ancient script of feeling like you're not enough gets activated again. Now, some people allow these devaluation and discarding cycles to happen because they'll often buy into the narcissist narrative about how difficult their lives were. And the narcissist's lives may very well have been quite difficult. The narcissist will often share a story about having never seen love when they were growing up and that it was so terrible for them. And you endure the narcissist cycle because you believe it's the loving thing to do, that maybe you're going to correct it for the narcissist, and it's not. Allowing yourself to be harmed in the name of love isn't love. Their tale of woe or abuse or trauma, it may be very, very true. They may have actually had a very rough childhood, and you're sorry about that. But it's not your responsibility. It's not your responsibility. You can't change their history. And remaining there as an object that at times they value, but more often reject, is not only not doing the narcissist any favors, it's taking a tremendous toll on your mental and physical health. There are no winners here. Now, being discarded is an awful feeling. It can raise tremendous triggers around abandonment and rejection. And lots of people will fight for the relationship at that point. They want to maintain that fantasy of the happy relationship or the happy family. The fact is, in some ways, we are really stubborn creatures, we human beings, and we fight for those things we can't have. We get stuck on the things we can't have. And things often become much more interesting when they're slipping away or we're just not allowed to have them. We're all the kids who want the thing in the cookie jar. And don't fall for that trick. If you have been devalued and then you're being discarded, receive it, believe it or not, as a gift. I know that sounds paradoxical, but it's a chance to get away from a relationship that is likely making you sick. But to do that, you have to value yourself first. And that requires a deeper dive into where those scripts about self-devaluation come from and flipping yourself over into a space of self-compassion. Now, keep in mind that self-compassion is like kryptonite against the charms of the narcissist. Once you have self-compassion, honestly, the narcissist is rendered powerless, and you can finally walk away. It's interesting to think that in a discard and a devalue cycle, that you could actually get that kind of power. You often feel like you're stuck at the whims of the narcissist when they will devalue you, when they will discard you, whether that's a partner, family member, or even a boss. But the fact of the matter is, ultimately, believe it or not, in these cycles, you have a lot more power than you think in the form of self-compassion. Self-compassion not only allows you to say, yeah, no, I'm not doing this cycle. I see what it is. It's not good for me. And allow you to step away. But self-compassion also allows you to feel compassion for the other. And as difficult and challenging as these narcissistic relationships are, as I said, many times narcissistic individuals have had very difficult backstories. In fact, it's what explains a lot of their personality and why it's organized the way it is. There is no need for you to engage in those kinds of toxic cycles. You don't have to devalue and discard. From a place of self-compassion,
you can also let them go from a place of compassion and in your heart, hope that maybe they can go and get the help they need to grow into a healthier future. However, that's not your job. Self-preservation is a right. And if you're going to preserve yourself in these cycles, you've got to exercise that right and break the devaluation and discard cycle.
Now, what do you do with those feelings when that narcissistic person jumps into a new relationship quickly, usually pretty soon after you end, and tells the world that the new person is the love of their life? Has this happened to you? I'd love to know. If you have, drop in the comments. Has it happened to you, or are you afraid it's going to happen to you? Because it doesn't feel good. You're with them, it was complicated, but they go meet someone else fast, and they might have even been with them before, and it's the love of their life. So let's set the tone. You're in a relationship with a narcissistic person. The relationship ends. Very quickly, or even within a few months, they enter a new relationship. Well, of course, they're narcissistic, so they can't not be noisy about it. So it's all, I finally met the love of my life, so this is what true love feels like. I finally got my love story. I waited my whole life, and finally, I have real love. You hear this or you read this, and it feels awful. You may even be glad the narcissistic relationship's over, but it still feels bad because you once heard those same things from them. So that leaves you in a position of, was it never real with me? Or even worse for some survivors, what does this new person have that I don't? Many people will say that these public proclamations of once-in-a-lifetime love story that they see their narcissistic ex doing can really ping on that whole idea of feeling not enough. Intellectually, you may even think, great, now they're your problem, new person, and not mine. But there's something about having your history with someone invalidated. The disconnect can feel unsettling. Obviously, there are layers of this. If you still had hope for the relationship or still cared, then when this happens, it can be utter devastation. If you are done and somewhat indifferent, but have, for example, children together, and your co-parented children are having to see this, it can kind of be awful to have to walk children through this and to accept that your narcissistic ex and co-parent is so unempathic that they wouldn't care about harming their children, who, of course, the narcissist believes their children should be so happy for them that who cares if the children are a little unsettled by their parents' brand new, shiny love story and their makeout pictures on social media. And if you are done and indifferent, well, then that's probably the best and the easiest. But after a while, the sort of wincing faces of people that feel bad for you, it may get on your nerves. Again, the reason they do this has nothing to do with you, and it has everything to do with the narcissistic incapacity for intimacy. Their intimacy is shallow, is focused solely on what it does for them, what it gets them. And so every new love story filled with excitement and fresh new supply, it's their new great love story. So when this feels just awful because it is unjust, is when they roll into a relationship that gives them the supply that they want. The new partner, who, I don't know, maybe has lots of money or is much younger or has a nice house or something. Because no matter how much you genuinely love them, and you did, the idea that they could trade it all in, trade a life you made with them for the thing that ticks the boxes better for their validation, it's absolutely devastating. And again, like I said, for survivors, it plays into an I am not enough mindset that often even predated the relationship. So what do you do when they say, I finally found my true love, right after leaving a relationship with you? Number one, however you need to do it, even repeating it over and over again, you got to remember this isn't about you. You were supply, and then you weren't supply, and they always get tired of supply. And that said, you're wondering, how am I supposed to survive this phase of their great new love story? The grandiosity makes for a short memory. They are reacting to what is in front of them, something new. They did the same with you. It's not personal, even though it feels deeply personal. This takes a minute. And so you need to, number two, be with the hurt. There will be grief in this process. You may think, oh, you know what, this fool isn't even worthy of my grief. It's not grief over them. It's grief that a process you cherished, loving another person, was wasted on a person who wasn't worthy of you, who was so shallow, who could be so ignorant of your feelings. All of that hurts. Be with that pain, therapy, self-compassion, trusted friends, other supports, all of that helps. But the only way out is through, and that means this is going to hurt. Number three, get the hell off of social media, please. It's so easy. Instagram is basically a glorified shopping mall these days, and Facebook is basically comprised of the conspiratorial rants of your unhinged friends and relatives. It's not good for you to see any of that. And the narcissistic person needs to broadcast their grandiose nonsense. I have no idea if a tree falls in the forest, whether it makes a sound if no one is there. I do know that if you don't have to see BS on social media, in a way it kind of isn't there, and you can focus on your healing. I understand if you need social media for your business, that's fine. Then block or fool with the settings so you don't need to see brand new love story posts that hurt. Number four, if you have them, protect your children. If this is relevant, you got to do it. What does that mean? Clean up your kids' social media feed if they're old enough to be on social media. Be the one who brings consistency into their life, because the flights of fancy and the new great love relationship for your ex means that your ex is now going to jet off to a tropical locale on the weekend of your children's school play, or will flake on custody weekends, or leave them unsupervised while they canoodle with their soulmate. Be present. Ensure that you have school and other significant events wired. Maintain their routines, and ensure that if you're able to hopefully get the clearance to do so, if you're co-parenting, that your child has access to mental health services. The narcissistic parent may be insistent that the children love their new great love, and children may struggle with this on multiple levels. Protect your children from the make-out pictures, the bikini shots, the vacation shots, the muscle shots, and the other things that may make them uncomfortable. Is it fair that on top of all else, you're having to act as a sentry to protect children from the ex's inappropriate behavior? No, none of this is fair. But being present for your children and being consistent is everything, especially in the midst of this circus. Number five, the injustice piece is so tough. Intellectually, you know that this will end up being the narcissist's new great love story that ends, but it does still feel unjust. While you may be grieving a relationship and they are in Hawaii with their once-in-a-lifetime love story, it hurts. Just like all pain, it's going to sting, it's going to hurt, so let it. The one advantage we have when it comes to heartbreak is time. The vast majority of folks start to right themselves with time, and this too will pass, with the added bonus that for narcissistic folks, all things bright will eventually fizzle, and that's going to happen with this too. Just don't let yourself get hoovered, right? Narcissistic folks live in a fantasy world. Fantasies of endless success, fame, fortune, and grandiose romantic love stories. It's why they often get married so many times. And even when they're getting married for the 10th time, they still have a big frothy white wedding with multiple wardrobe changes. They need the spectacle. So it's really about the spectacle, not the companionship, the consistency, the respect, the compassion, the mutuality of regard, the growth, or the kindness. These are typically photoshopped relationships. Grieving a broken heart is the most human of experiences, and one of the more painful ones. It is made more painful when the object of the broken heart is denying the experience you had. Your reality was different, and you lost your reality in that relationship. It's painful to be reminded of that, even in the aftermath. And then as you heal and are able to get more detached, there will come that moment when their greatest love story, love of my life, soulmate goes kaput. Grab some popcorn with some schadenfreude sprinkled on top and breathe into the predictability of these personalities and your resilience in the face of it. If nothing else, I hope this video is a validation for those of you going through this. It's real, it hurts, and nothing I or anyone else can say can change that. But also, it's a reminder that for narcissistic folks, my great new love is just code for a, look, I got new supply. So, have any of you had this situation that sometimes, and I'm telling you that sometimes, but have you ever find yourself that just as you were getting happy, like your life was really going well again, that's when they hoover you? Well, what we're going to talk about today, this idea that sometimes they hoover you because they don't want you to be happy. Okay, so let's sort of lay it out this way. So let's say your narcissistic relationship ends, right? Maybe you ended it, maybe they ended it, maybe it ended badly, the kind of thing where they cheated or betrayed you in some way. Whatever it may be, the narcissistic relationship ends. And that's never easy because it's so confusing. You may grieve, you may mourn, you may feel devastated even though you know it's good for you. You ruminate, you obsess, you look at their social media if they have it. You might go through a period where you can't sleep or you lose weight because you can't eat. You go into therapy maybe. Maybe you go into a certain Dr. Ramani's healing program. And as always, that link is available in the video notes. But you do what you can to heal from this, right? But you do the work. Time passes, and honestly, when it comes to healing from narcissistic abuse, time may be your greatest friend. You start to feel better. Then you start to feel really better. Maybe work starts going better. Maybe you meet someone, or you travel, or you do other things that you've always wanted to do. You slowly take your life back, and you really recognize that your life is so much better without the narcissistic person in it. It took you a while, and you're getting closer and closer to indifference, to not caring about what has happened to them or what they're doing. You may not even wish them ill will, but you just don't care about them anymore. You really are in what I consider to be this zone of healing. And then one day, you see a message from them. Maybe you block them, but they use a new number. Maybe you didn't block them. Maybe it's an email that gets through. It's a lot harder to block email. But you're resolute. However they try to break you down, it's as though they've made a list of every single thing you ever had wanted to hear from them. That they are sorry, that now they finally see that your gifts and your goodness, that they weren't worthy of you, that they knew you would be better off without them, and they play the victim. Who knows? Whatever it is, they just keep going. But you're the new improved you right now, right? You're more healed, you feel resolute, and even believe that you've now evolved. And you might start making that mistake of like, well, I'm healed. We could be friends, right? That's what modern, healthy people do. You might even respond to their messages. You might even give them some advice because they're going through a tough time. And maybe you even agree to meet. And that means checkmate. And now it's their game again. The tricky thing about life post-narcissist is to not advertise your growth and healing too much, which I know is not easy in a social media world. If you are still struggling and crying into your coffee and sharing your misery, the narcissistic person isn't that interested in you. They've already overwhelmed you, and they're done with you. They're on to their next thing. And as long as you're miserable, they don't care, like they've already ruined you. But if you share your growth, you and having a happy new relationship, you traveling the world, you thriving, now you're happy and you're tempting. They may hoover you to show you that they can still dominate you or that they can still win, or maybe they're just sadistic and they don't want you to be happy. I actually believe that for narcissistic people, other people's happiness disgusts them. But you want to share your joy with the world, and I get that. And I think it's wonderful, but it's dangerous. It's almost like using your real identity while you are in the witness protection program, right? It's dangerous. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Because if they see that you're happy, you become someone to dominate again, to harm again. So what do? Number one, keep in mind that indifference and detachment are just that. Do not engage is not a short-term strategy. It is a forever strategy. The more severe the narcissistic abuse, the greater the importance that you should never engage with them again.
If they send you a cryptic message from a new phone, old phone, any phone, block again, or at the very least, ignore it. The same with DMs and emails. If you can't stop that, if you can't do enough blocking, then no backing and forthing. But if you do respond, that means you're in play. And then it becomes more of a game for them. It's like you're a live bite on a fishing line. You need to be at the most advanced levels of healing to not engage. Now, also keep in mind, if you are in a new relationship, well, that could be a little bit of a protection or a hedge because you don't want to hurt the new person by engaging with a harmful person from your past. At least I hope you don't. But that new person, having that new person in your life, will lead them to try even harder. And I'll say more about that in a minute. The narcissistic person may even see that they're in danger. If they're in danger, call 911 and send an ambulance to their house. But do not engage. Number 2, if you are in a new relationship, well, fact is that is game on for a narcissistic person because now there is someone to take you away from, and they love that kind of fight. Think of how, and just take a minute, and think of how you would feel if your new partner started interacting with a narcissistic and manipulative ex. My guess is not good, so don't you do it either. It becomes a major cat and mouse game between you and the ex-narcissist in your life. And the idea that you have someone new in your life gets their juices going. Keep your new relationship under wraps. And even just to be empathic to your new partner, do not respond, block even if it's multiple numbers being blocked, and do not engage. Do not engage. Number 3, if you aren't all the way indifferent and still feel you would respond to the narcissist, then if you can find a way, don't put your life on social media. Because if even one person from your life has a connection to the narcissistic person, even if your account settings are in private, even if you've blocked the ex-narcissist, your success and happiness becomes something for them to dismantle. And narcissistic folks are masterful at recruiting flying monkeys and spies. I know people love sharing their lives on social media, but if you are in the acute stages of healing and it was a more severe narcissistic relationship, keep your healing quiet for now. Number 4, really, really ask your friends to never share how your life is going with the ex-narcissistic person. I know that can feel a little bossy, but some people, especially enably people, just don't get this. Now, the fact is, this is not something you can really enforce, but you can certainly try to remind them. And if you are a friend of someone, don't think you are doing them any favors by rolling up to the ex-narcissist in their life if you see them out and about and saying, hey, your ex is doing great and has a new life and a new thing and a new that. That may not end up being an issue, but it could also just aggravate or incite the narcissist enough to make them want to reach in and make a mess of things in a new life you've made. And number 5, no, it won't be different this time. Just because you feel better about yourself and are doing things you love, that doesn't mean they change. They don't change. I don't have enough days in the week to list all of the people out there who have told me that they were actually at the top of their game when they originally met the narcissist who was in their life. And the narcissistic person dismantled them brick by brick. Always remember what was done to you. And maybe right now you're healed and you're single, or healing and single. And you're feeling good about your life. And then the narcissist wanders back in. I promise you, if you let them back in, that same dismantling process will happen again. It's what they do. Scorpion is gonna sting. Narcissistic people are allergic to other people's happiness. It's really that simple. And especially the happiness of people who they have already controlled and dominated. So if you want to share it, then make sure your gates are tall and high so the narcissist can't come back in and do any more harm. They don't change. That's the nature of this personality and the thing that gives them joy. Control, domination, power, those things still give them joy. And that usually means harming you. For this reason, journaling is so important. You need to read all of the terrible stuff that happened in this relationship because you journaled it in real time. And also to journal your healing so you can see how hard the work was of grief and of healing. Read all of that, see all of that before you ever let them in again. Thanks again. Thanks again. Thanks again. Thanks again. Thanks again.